Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Design Streaming Sessions. I'm your host, Verma Henry, and I'm a product designer out in Johannesburg, South Africa. I am the founder of DoBetterUX.com, a place where we are trying to give people a non-BS approach to learning UX design through giving you all the knowledge that we get from real life experience and not just the vanilla stuff that you get on the internet, and also an evolving perspective of what UX design is. I just want to check out something quickly. If actually we didn't go live for the past hour, for the past 30 minutes, and if we really need to replay everything and play this back. But it seems like we're not live for the past 30 minutes that we've been streaming here. So we're just gonna do a quick check as to what's happening on the YouTube channel, and we'll be, get to kick it off. If you are here checking this out, please feel free to say hello in the chat and tell us where you are watching from, and how your Friday is doing. Okay. So it seems like we're live. Seems like we never went live, which is a terrible thing. But you know what? Let's rock it. Welcome to the stream. It seems like we didn't go live for the past 30 minutes. So I was basically speaking to the camera by myself, and oh god, it never gets old. It's like the microphone situation, where everyone is on mute, and we always saying, "Yo, are you on mute? I was on mute." Blah blah blah. Anyway. Let's jump into the live streaming session today. My name is Verma Henry. I'm a product designer from Johannesburg, South Africa, and I'm the founder of DoBetterUX.com. I think I've said that already. And welcome to the live stream. If you're checking us out, you probably want to find out what UX design is. And we're going to also talk about, what do UX designers do in this live streaming session. So if you have any questions as we go throughout the live streaming session, please feel free to drop them in the chat section, and if you are watching this after the fact, please feel free to throw your comments, your questions rather, in the comment section below. So let's jump right into it. I've actually closed a lot of my notes here because I had finished doing the live stream. It's super crazy. Anyway, so here we go. So if you've been checking out the internet and you are watching this, you probably have been looking out for what is UX design, and trying to figure out really this UX design thing. You're probably somebody who's getting into UX design, and in this episode we just wanted to chat about that and really take you through some of my own definitions from experience, and sort of like the evolving talk about the evolving UX designer role, because the UX designer role is always evolving. It's super amazing, and I think it's something that a lot of the videos that you might have watched, or some of the articles or things that you might have read that might be a year or two or older, might not cover some of the things that we'll cover here in the live stream. So what is UX design, and what is the definition? So if you've looked up on the internet, you probably found something like, UX design is speaks about, being useful, usable, desirable, etc., etc. But my definition of what UX design is, I think it's really a discipline of focusing on the user and trying to solve for their problems. And their needs, rather. And, as a UX designer, I think you're really the advocate of the user. You are the champion of the user in any company. And UX design really seeks to, answer product questions from the user's perspective rather than from, the business perspective, which is something that is really important to figure out that if you have a look at companies that, focus on design and ones that don't focus on design, the ones that don't focus on design are usually trying to build a product and then trying to fit it into a market or, find a market around it. Whereas companies that actually focus on, design, really look at the user and a problem that's within the world, and they go in and solve for that specific problem with a product. So unlike the other way around of having a product that is being pushed down the throats of people, you have sorry about that, just need to take quick text. Other than shoving a product down the throats of people, we really have a perspective where we are looking at what is the problem that the user is having, what is the problem in the world that we're trying to solve, and then we go in and sort of like work towards that and try to solve that specific problem with a digital product. So as I'll be sort of like interchangeably talking about a UX designer and a product designer in this streaming session, you'll find out that there's a lot of overlap, especially within the fundamental skills that these two roles, usually do. If you're looking at the two roles on the internet as a product designer or UX designer, I think, these days they are pretty much used interchangeably, and it's pretty much accepted from, company to company. But I'll get into the details of how that happened and some of the other sort of like descriptions that you can use to describe the role of the UX designer. So I wanted to talk about, the fundamental things that you would find in UX design. So there are a couple of things that you would find if you look for the design thinking process, if you're looking at things like UX design process, etc., etc. This is getting a little bit into what UX designers do, but not really. You will find that there is many processes that you see. Company to company it might be different. Some of them start with empathize. You get into some sort of research, you get to some sort of ideation or sketching or design, and then there's a testing and a production. There's different forms and things that you'll find on the internet if you look up for UX design process or design thinking process, which there's also a lot of overlap, like UX design and product design. Like really over the past 5 years or so, the terminology and the expectations around the role has really have a lot of overlap around what we call the UX designer and the product designer, around what we call a product and a website and an app, design thinking and UX design process. There's a lot of human-centered design. There's all these terminologies that you'll find that really speak to this UX designer role. And function of what a UX designer is. But basically, with all those different processes that you see online, and other things, whether it's a design thinking or UX design process, the fundamental things remain the same, right? There's really the basic fundamentals, that it starts with some sort of research or empathizing with the user, trying to figure out what the user's needs are, which is, it's not a linear step, but I'm going to say which is number one on most of these things that you'll see. And then they get into some sort of defining what the product is, which is usually the scoping type of phase, which will be number two, but again, not linear. I'll get into that in a bit. And number three, you get into some sort of ideation, prototyping or sketching. The terms are different for this type of for this stage. And then number four, you get to some sort of, testing, which is very basic in most of them. You usually have testing or usability testing, but, some sort of testing. And then you get to production, or product or whatever it is, or handoff to, production or whatever it is. So those are usually, sort of like the four, did I count four? I think those are the 4 or 5 steps that you usually find in any of these processes. But those are not linear process. It's not a linear process. Like UX design is not a linear process. The design thinking thing is not a linear process either. The reason why it's not a linear process is that depending on the company you're working with or on the project that you get on, there's different stages that you can jump onto a project on. So maybe it's a product that's already in the market, and you are required to, analyze the feedback and, the data that is coming, the user data that is coming through, how many users there are, where the drop-off points for you to be able to pick up where the pain points are and drop-off points are for you to be able to optimize for that experience, right? There's many different ways to look at it. I lost my train of thought there, actually. Anyway, going back to just, so what is UX design? If you want to define it and, we want to put it in a simple term, my definition, as I said, is a user, centric approach to designing products and, really solving for specific user needs. So looking at the user, externally, unlike, businesses that are focusing on products first and then trying to sell them into a market. I was talking about the UX design process that is different from stage to stage, but it's, it's really about where you interact with the project or the company that you are in. So if you're working as a consultant, like I have for the past, 5 years or so, you really put in roles where you're part of a team and you are, doing different things depending on what's the required outcome. Sometimes you might just be doing user testing or just prototyping and user testing. Sometimes maybe you're just the prototyping guy. So depending on the role that you fall in, what UX designers do actually, differ, place by place. But the process and the underlying sort of like skill set of what we call a UX designer and a product designer are pretty much, the same and sit within the realm of things. I'll speak about some of the key differentiators of, some of the things that I've seen that some of the best UX designers have, versus, some of just, good designers that I've seen out there. But yeah, I wanted to talk about the design process, the design thinking process that you might, see when you're looking for what UX design is, trying to figure out what that is that yes, the process, it's an underlying process. It's not a linear process, and also it's a iterative process, right? Because for us to build better products and optimize them for different human behavior, new technologies and things like that, we have to go back, trying to understand how can we optimize and make them better and, really apply some of the new things that people are experiencing within, their lives and within the world. So whenever you look at the UX design process, it's not a linear thing. It's something that, can be morphed company to company. There's a lot of smaller different methodologies and processes that happen under that, main umbrella blanket process. But you'll be able to figure out, depending on what role, what company you're working in, you'll be able to figure it out as to what are you actually expected to do as a UX designer, which brings us to the next part of our conversation, which is what do UX designers actually do. Up to this day, I cannot explain, for whatever reason, I cannot explain to my mother what I actually do, right? I've tried to explain to my kids, but they think I design the apps that they use in their phone, which is close. But yeah, I'll try and explain it in a way that if you're trying to get into UX design, you can actually make some sense of it and use it. So the best way that I usually look at what do UX designers do, or rather what are they expected to do within any given role, is that I usually go on job posts and job boards across the internet, mainly on LinkedIn, and I look at different roles that I know that speak to UX design. So product designer is one role, UX designer is one role, UX researcher is one role, UX engineer is one role, UX analyst is another role. There's sort of like these specialist roles that you can find around UX designer, around a product designer, and there's also very sort of like vanilla things that you'll see in majority of those things. So things like prototyping, things like wireframing, things like usability testing, things like user research. Those things are underlining skills that you would be expected to do in any of those roles that I've mentioned. So check those things out and figure out how you want to learn them. There's tons and tons of information on the internet that you can get around learning how to do usability testing, or what usability testing is. Let me know if you would like us to have a live streaming session where you can actually answer some of the things that are not very clear. See if we can answer those questions of yours live here on the session. Having said that, there is, a healthy number of definitions of what the UX designer role is and what the product designer role is. And if you look at some of the things that I mentioned, sort of like prototyping, doing user research, usability testing, etc., are usually sort of like the fundamental things that you would find in any of these roles, that the things that you would find overlapping in any of these roles. But depending on which role you're looking for, and this is why you might want to look at the different UX design roles that are there, right? Is that maybe you are starting a UX design, you're looking to get into UX design from a specific background. Like last week we had I'd like to believe that it's a gentleman on the live stream who says he comes, actually it was a lady, sorry. There was a lady who was on the live stream who actually comes from, a business analyst background, and she was trying to figure out what are some of the things that she could do to get into UX design. So somebody like that can, look up for a job like a UX researcher, a UX analyst, because, the role's responsibility will be mainly based around, doing research and analyzing data, etc. Whereas if you're coming from something like a web development background, maybe you are somebody who builds user interfaces, etc., and really want to immerse yourself in the UX design role, and you think that there's something, you know, you might enjoy or add value to your customers that you're dealing with, you know, you might want to get into something like a UX engineer, because out of the underlining you know, sort of like basic things around, you know, understanding user needs, doing user testing, etc., you know, you might be required to be able to write some CSS code, some front-end code, and do some front-end development work as well, you know, along with sort of like the basic UX designer role. There's things like UX writing, right? So if you're a copywriter or somebody who's in, you know, who's skilled in writing, you can get into something like UX writing, where you can, you know, find yourself really, you know, crafting the copy of, you know, the design experience, whether it's on an app or in a website, and be able to apply your writing skills in that context. You know, so there's all these different parts of UX that you can really specialize in. But if you're somebody who's starting in UX, you know, what I would advise is that, you know, learn the basics that are in each part of this role, and depending on where you would like to take your career, you know, whether you're somebody who's more creative, whether you're somebody who's into writing, whether you're somebody who, you know, likes to fidget with code here and there, you know, maybe you want to get, you know, start with the basics, learn the basics, learn, you know, the UX design process, sort of like those basics and some of the methodologies that underlining them. So what is, you know, user testing? How do you run a user testing? What is a usability testing? What's the difference? You know, how do you, you know, empathy mapping, you know, what are all those things, etc. So get the fundamentals right so that you can get yourself into a UX designer role right away, and then you can, you know, sort of like specialize as you go within, you know, advancing your career, and you can specialize in different things here and there depending on, you know, your skill set and what where you would like to take your career. So those are some of the things that I'd like, you know, people to think about when looking at what do UX designers do. But basically what UX designers do is that, you know, we do exactly what UX design is. We try and solve our users' problems, you know, we try to meet our users' needs through really understanding what their user needs are, and solving for that, whether, you know, you're using design thinking methodologies, whether, you know, just some of the vanilla basic ways that, you know, UX designers use that you might see in most of those processes like define, sketch, etc., ideate. Those are some of the things that you might consider. So having spoken to that, I think, you know, other than, you know, some of the, I'm not going to get into the tools and other things. In next week's live stream, we're really going to take a deep dive into some of the UX design tools. So we're going to be talking about the UX design toolkit, if you may, and some of the skills in more detail than we are talking about them right now. So if that sounds like, you know, something that's interesting to you, please do consider subscribing to the channel so that you don't miss that one when it comes through. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to either leave them in the chat right now, or you can drop them in the comment section below if you're watching this after the fact. So moving along swiftly, now that I've spoke lightly on what the role of the UX designer is and some of the, you know, sort of like fundamental skills, I think there are three skills that really set, you know, a lot of some of the best UX designers that I've seen, from some of the good ones that I've seen, right? So number one is, you know, the ability to communicate well. And when I say the ability to communicate well, as a UX designer, you will be you know, required to play a bigger part of the project, being able to translate what your findings are to stakeholders, to other designers that are helping you with the user interface and actually building the app or whatever you're building, and developers as well. So you really need to be able to sort of get into the motion of being able to rudder the team together, being able to communicate freely, being able to present your findings to stakeholders and other people, being able to sell your story and get a buy-in on your solution, right? So communication is a really, 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 really big part of UX design, and how you are able to sort of like navigate a lot of conversations in product design is really important, right? Another thing that I would like to add onto that is sort of like facilitating sort of like design thinking or brainstorming workshops. That is, a huge, another underrated skill that a lot of designers out there that I see, they sort of like don't take the lead and really jump into those conversations. They sort of like, get invited into these brainstorming sessions that other stakeholders have set up and sort of like just contribute. I'd like you to sort of like focus on the skills that help you be that person who's actually driving those conversations, because there's a lot of methodologies and approaches that you can use off the internet. One of my favorite one is called the Lightning Decision Jam, which really helps you come to make decisions quicker and move on onto solutions very fast, without waste of all the conversation, up and down conversation that we usually have, all those Zoom calls that were supposed to be just emails, etc. So check out the Lightning Decision Jam. That is one way you can really upskill your workshopping, brainstorming skills to be able to really bring your UX designer value to another level, right? So being able to communicate well, present, and all of that good stuff, being able to run workshops, engage with people within, again, the communication comes back into play there, and the third thing, I think, more than anything, there's a lot of people who are getting into UX design or product design. There's a product owner type of role and thing that happens, right? So if you are a UX designer and you really understand who your user is, it's really in your court to be able to own that conversation with the main stakeholder, with the product owner. If you're not the product owner, with the product owner, to be able to communicate your findings, be able to get feedback from the team and developers and other people, and being able to really coordinate the project, right? Almost as if you're a project manager, but really staying on top of things, and making sure that people are not doing extra work that they don't need to be doing, and really focusing on the things that solve your users' problems directly. So those are some of the things that I think are really important for UX designers to consider. Those three skills, being able to communicate well, being able to, project manage well, really stay on top of the project, and being able to workshop, brainstorm and bring a team together and, solve things together and drive those conversations. So what is UX design and what do UX designers do? I hope that I've managed to answer some of your questions that you might have had in this live streaming session. I have sort of like covered, some of the skills that I think UX designers need to focus on in 2021 and beyond. I think, these skills will apply in the world of, designing for AI, for VR, for all of these different components of technology that we're getting into, and also keeping an eye, on technology and other things that are happening around us, like voice, and really being able to apply some of the knowledge around those things into your UX design career is really important for you to stay on top of things and be able to be the trendy person and understanding all these technology advancements, because if you're a UX designer who's working in VR today or voice today, you are way more sort of like advanced and in the future more than somebody that's just designing for user interfaces, right? Which is something that we've been doing for the past, couple of decades now, just designing computer interfaces, human computer interfaces as they call them. So those are some of the things that I think are important for people who are getting into UX design and, who want to know what UX design is or what do UX designers actually do. So if you found some value in this live design streaming session, please consider subscribing to the channel and joining us every week for all the upcoming topics that we have lined up for you this year. This January, we're really focusing on getting started in UX design and covering topics around getting started into UX design. So this is our second live streaming session of the year. Next week, we'll be talking about UX design tools and, taking a deep dive into some of the UX design skills. We do have a podcast called Not a UX Designer, available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. There you'll be able to, get other insights as well. We have recently, this week, released our first episode of the year, season 3. Super excited to get into the third year of our podcast. We're talking about the return on investment of good UX design. So check that out if that sounds like something that you might want to learn about. You can also learn more about all of the other things that we do, all the other exciting content that we put out, like our blog post, our weekly newsletter, learn about our design community over at dobetterux.com. You'll see the website evolve over the next couple of months because we're really trying to bring you content for people who are getting into UX design, or if you're somebody who's trying to take your UX design to the next UX design career to the next level. We're really trying to give you sort of like a no BS content that is really driven from your user engagement, the questions you're asking, as well as not just the vanilla stuff that you read on the internet, but real life experience and expertise that we can help you answer some of the questions that you might have getting into your UX design career or trying to sort of like beef up your product design career. So having said that, this brings us to the end of this week's live streaming session. I hope that I'll see you again next week. And if you have any questions and you really like some real life interaction and don't want to wait for these live streaming sessions or really speak to that specific topic that we're speaking about every week, feel free to check us out in our free LinkedIn design community or group rather. Just look out for Do Better UX on LinkedIn. You'll be able to find our page and our group. Hit join on our page and looking forward to seeing you there. Until next week, I'm out.